mankind stuck together. They continued to rebel against God. There was only one language spoken. At Babel, they began some kind of man-made religion, building this tower to the heavens. And God came and confused their languages. So maybe different families could no longer communicate with each other, and they abandoned that project at Babel and began to spread out on the face of the earth. And as they moved out from the Middle East and began to move into different environments through natural selection, and natural selection is a fact, it occurs. In fact, it was identified by guys like Edward Blythe long before Darwin. And Blythe saw it as a God-created mechanism to enable creatures to adapt in different environments and to cull the unfit. And he impacted Darwin. But natural selection creates nothing new. It only takes from information that's already in the genome and selectively culls information, enabling variation, adaptation, survival in different environments. So as people moved into different environments, differences would begin to occur. And you know, every single one of us is different. Think of it, us here this morning, we're all different. Different heights, different sizes, nose shape, eye shape, hair color, eye color. We're all different. What's the difference that we make the different ages? I think I heard there, yeah? What's the difference that historically we've tended to make the biggest fuss about? Color, skin color. People call people black and white. This is my colleague, Dr. Don Batten. He's a plant biologist in Australia. What color is he? Okay. You're being cautious. I do this in schools, and instantly kids will still say white. And then I love it in schools. Often they're sitting there in their white shirts, school uniforms, and I say, look at the person next to you. If he's the color of his shirt, call the ambulance because they're in big trouble. Yeah? Because there's nobody that's white. Yeah? There's white. We'd call her a black lady. What color is she? Dark brown. And we live in a world of every shade in between very light brown and very dark brown. Because there's only one skin color. It's called melanin. And those of us that are a little bit melanin challenged, we've only got the genetic information. We've lost genetic information to produce lots of melanin. As we went off into the northern climates, what do our bodies produce from exposure to sunlight? Vitamin D. And if we're not getting enough sunlight, vitamin D deficiency, rickets, bone diseases, less likely to survive, less likely to pass on the genetic information for producing lots of melanin. The opposite is true. People coming down after Babel into tropical climates. Those being born with more melanin in their skins, more resistance to sunlight and cancer and so on, more likely to survive. So natural selection processes easily explain the differences that began to occur in people groups. Babel, after that one gene pool before Babel, was now all of these little genetic bottlenecks going off in different directions. But you bring that genetic information back together again, it would have been in the people before the flood and in Adam and Eve and before Babel. And in one generation, some very interesting things happen. Maybe some of you have seen this. There's many, many examples of this. This is a British couple. Both of them had parents, one light brown skin and one dark brown skin. There's their twin baby girls. Brown eyes, dark skin, dark hair, blue eyes, fair skin, fair hair. One of the recent editions of National Geographic magazine have got some late teens, early 20s, lovely girls on their cover. They're recognizing the racist past of National Geographic, and they've put these biracial, so-called biracial twins on the cover. But there's many examples of that. We wrote on them a few years ago in our magazine, Creation magazine, and lovely teenagers today. And when my colleague, Dr. Johan Kruger, here in South Africa, he was a former lecturer at Rand Afrikaans University, started our ministry in South Africa. He was speaking on the subject a few years ago in George. When he was finished, a guy stood up at the back and said, "Praise die Here, alle meneer van was colored." And you know, genetically, he's probably right. They would have been mid-brown skin color and would have had the genetic information to have children of both dark brown skin and light brown skin, just through different combinations of recessive and dominant genes. I began earlier by referring to Peter saying that we should be equipping ourselves, preparing ourselves to make a defense of our faith. I left this part. Peter said, do it with gentleness and respect. You know, we can be such know-it-alls. Yeah, we really can. And this isn't about winning arguments and filling our heads with knowledge. It's about the truth, the accuracy, the authority of God's word, and the claims of Christ and Jesus, or claims of Jesus on people's lives. Yeah, we could fill people's minds with this stuff, and if they don't get saved, it's absolutely valueless, worthless in the sight of God and for his kingdom. So let's share this kind of information with the right heart and ask God to equip us and give us that right heart for this information. Okay. Questions? Any questions that somebody would like to ask? Yeah.
And our teacher, she says she's a Christian, but she believes on God.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard to fight, not fight with her, but try to convince her that it's not true.
Mm-hmm.
And lots of the Christians she's starting to sway them because she says the Bible is a book of stories and we need you to the truth. And I don't know how to.
Thank you very much for that question. And that is very revealing, I think, to all of us of the type of stuff that's going on. You know, sometimes teachers, you know, they are paid and they're forced, they have to do it. And when people ask us, you know, when teachers ask us, we say, look, that is your job. You need to do the very best you can to equip your students to pass their exams, to excel in their exams. But if you're a Christian, equip yourself, first of all. So this is how we advise teachers. Equip yourself with this kind of information so that you can at least provide an alternative to your students. Even if you don't teach them biblical creation, at least teach them that difference between real historical science, or real experimental science, and historical science. They're two totally different things. Sometimes there's a bit of an overlap, but they're different things. In order to get them thinking for themselves. But of course, some teachers, they're forced to teach it, and they therefore just accept it. They believe, well, you know, I'm teaching science. This is science, and therefore I have to believe it. So often they're in a difficult position. But from your perspective, what do? You know, be very respectful. Make sure you get 100% for your evolutionary part of your papers, because that's part of the curriculum. And equip yourself. And as you get opportunity, you know, it's, as I say, you're never going to argue somebody out of their position. But you could ask a question, you know, about the nature of science. You know, you could say something, you know, I respect science, I enjoy science. But, you know, to me, science is things that we can experiment on and observe and repeat. And, you know, we can, doesn't matter what we believe, we can go and boil a jug of water down at sea level, and at what temperature will it boil? 100 degrees Celsius. Will atheists and Christians get the same result? So, yeah, that's the nature of real observational experimental science. But can we do that type of experiment with origins? You know, name me an experiment that'll prove that birds evolved into dinosaurs, or reptiles evolved into birds over hundreds of millions of years or tens of millions of years. Can't be done. It's a story. It's an interpretation of the evidence. So we can kind of gently realize that they're in a difficult situation, but we can gently, as the opportunity presents itself, either to our friends or else to our teachers, just very respectfully try and challenge them gently to maybe rethink their acceptance of evolution as the truth, as the scientific truth. say something like, do you know that just about every single one of the fathers of the different fields of science were Bible-believing, creation-believing Christians? And you can name most of them. Maxwell, Linnaeus, Carolus Linnaeus, that came up with the classification system for animals of genus and species, that binomial classification system, Bible-believing, creation-believing Christian. Johannes Kepler, Faraday, Maxwell, Isaac Newton, Louis Pasteur, they all believed the Bible, and they believed the creation account of the Bible. So, maybe some ideas there, but ultimately, it's not kind of your it's not your duty to change somebody's mind, but as we can equip ourselves, and as the opportunity presents itself, we can gently get people to challenge their way of thinking. But very, very important what you're saying, that there are Christian kids as well, and they are being swayed by this kind of information. It's happening everywhere. And I'm telling you, the worldview in South Africa, we regard ourselves as a Christian nation, a Christian culture. It is rapidly being eroded and destroyed, and all the stuff that comes with it. You saw guys like Bill Provan, no foundation for ethics, no God, nobody to tell me what to do, make my own decision. I can decide whether I'm a boy or a girl, and that kind of thing. And the church is being undermined by all of this as well, because if the Bible is not true history, how do I defend marriage? Or Genesis is not true history, how do I defend marriage? Jesus defended it by going back to Genesis as real history. He quoted from Genesis chapter 1 and Genesis chapter 2. From the beginning of the creation, God made them male and female. How do we do it if it's just kind of a parable? It's not real history. How do we defend marriage? And that's the sorry condition of much of the church today. My colleague, Peter, he's an ex-teacher, biology teacher, Peter LaRue, zoologist. He also speaks all over the country now. He's a part-time speaker like myself. He's got a real passion for biology teachers, and he's got a little pack that includes this book, and he gives one of those to every biology teacher that he comes across around the country. And maybe you could give her a copy of this. And so, won't you read this? Won't you read this and think about it? And don't do it in a challenging way, but just in a very soft way. Okay.
So, Michael, I could just add, I've got a 16-year-old sister, and in her paper, she writes, according to the evolution theory, and that's an interesting
Yeah, believe him. Yeah.
So, she can easily state what textbooks say, and but she, because it's also a passion of hers, so she feels that her conviction, and she wants to get
where she stands. Yeah, excellent. And that's a way of approaching it as well. In some countries, you will even be failed if you do that, because it casts some kind of a shadow on the idea that evolution may not be true. So there's got to be a lot of wisdom. We advise young people, especially going into university. There's a young lady that basically was exposed as fairly early to this information. She went on to get her doctorate in molecular biology at Stellenbosch. She's a practicing research scientist today in KZN. And we advised her, don't make a big thing. Keep your head down. Don't become a target unnecessarily. It'll make things very difficult for yourself. But she was able to distinguish between the wonderful science. And basically, there are evolutionary biologists that say that no practical benefits come from evolutionary biology. There are no benefits to it. It's resulted in no tangible technology or medicine or anything like that is of any use. It's the real science, the experimental, repeatable, observational science. That's where all the good stuff comes from that has brought so many benefits. So there are some, even evolutionary scientists, and yet 50% of your paper is dealing with evolution. Why? Because it's a belief system. It undergirds a belief system, and it's very important. Are our belief systems important? Evolutionists think that their belief systems are even more important than our own, than the Christian belief system, and it's undergirded by evolution. Richard Dawkins said evolution enabled him to be an intellectually fulfilled atheist. Very interesting comment. So what was the priority to him? Evolution or atheism? Atheism. And evolution undergirded his atheism. In other words, it gave him a mechanism of trying to answer some of the big questions of origins and so on without God. And that is the history of evolution. It was a support for the belief systems that people already had, including Darwin, Charles Lyell. These guys were deists. They denied that God had any intervention. He basically started the clock ticking, and he had no further intervention. And evolution was a mechanism to understand the big questions without God's intervention in the universe. Another question?
Surely we must be evolving in some way, because if you look at photographs of people 500 years ago, they are different. Now, it's not just the hairstyle, and it's not just the clothes. And also, like even in our jaw situation, we don't need our wisdom teeth anymore. They're gone, right? So our jaws have got smaller than they have, because there's no room for wisdom. And what about our coccyx? We don't need that anymore. And what about our appendix? We don't need that anymore. So especially the coccyx, we don't keep there for one reason.
Okay, all right.
Because the jaw situation, the jaws must have been bigger.
Okay, so there's two parts to that. The first thing, we are changing. Now, you said we are evolving. Now, those pictures that you look at people of 500 years ago, do you recognize them as people?
They're people.
If you saw somebody like that in the street today, would you recognize them as people? Yeah. So they're not getting more complex or growing new organs, becoming something else. People are people. And that is natural selection. So there's no new information there. There's nothing new being added. It's just different permutations of genes, different variations of genes called alleles, these different populations, these genetic drift and so on. But there's no new information being created through that process. And we can do it artificially, and we do it all the time. We take a population of cows, and we select from that population and breed for certain characteristics for producing more milk. But those characteristics are already there. The information is already there. We're selecting it in order to increase yields of milk. But there's nothing new. There's no new genes involved, no new DNA information. It's just selecting from information that is already there. And that's all that natural selection does. It just selects from information. And a lot of it is neutral. A lot of it loses information. Because once you start interbreeding, you begin increasingly to lose some of that information, the recessive genes and so on. That's why you can't, even evolutionists today recognize that all of your dog breeds, your wild dogs, wolves, coyotes, as well as your domestic dogs, go back to an original dog kind or wolf kind. And they can still interbreed today. But you can't take a Chihuahua and breed back to a Great Dane. It's lost the information. You can't even take a Great Dane and breed back to a Chihuahua because it's lost that genetic information. So change, variation, adaptation doesn't provide what evolution needs. The general theory of evolution says that all life has evolved over millions of years from these, either a common ancestor, a single common ancestor, or a handful of common ancestors. So natural selection, change, adaptation, variation, but nothing new is created. And Darwin believed that natural selection does it. With Mendelian genetics, it was recognized that natural selection creates nothing new. It just selects from information that's already there. They started what is called neo-Darwinism, where the engine of evolution is mutations, and that's what we spoke about a little bit earlier, that there's these copying errors, and most of them are neutral, a lot of them are horribly harmful. Sometimes they may be beneficial and give new, good information. Mathematically, it's impossible. Experimentally and observationally, it doesn't happen, but that's the only thing left for evolutionists to claim that evolution is real, and this is the mechanism of how it works. There we go. That was the other thing. Coccyx. Your coccyx forms in the developing embryo. It's an anchor for tendons and muscles and everything that are anchored to the coccyx as the baby begins to develop. The idea that we can do without it, we just cannot possibly do without it. I grew up in the 70s. We were taught that these were vestigial organs. These were leftovers. Tonsils and appendix were the favorite two. That they were leftovers from our evolutionary history. They got no use. If there's a problem, an infection in the 70s, what did they used to do? Just whip them out. I was always envious. I had all of these friends, and I heard they got ice cream and jelly in hospital when they had their tonsils out. And, well, doctors don't do that anymore. If they can save the appendix or the tonsil, they try and save it through antibiotics and so on. Why? Because they know it does have a function. The appendix, one of it's involved with our immune system, especially in the developing baby. It also acts as a bank for probiotics. It's a resupply to our intestinal system when we lose our microbiome, which is so important. If we've got diarrhea or something, it repopulates the gut with probiotics. So there's another. So there used to be over 100 organs that were called vestigial. 100 years ago, there were more than 100 organs that were meant to have been our leftovers from our evolutionary past. They're down to a handful. What did it mean? It just meant they didn't know what they did. Now they do, increasingly. Junk DNA was the same kind of idea. Okay, dinosaurs, when did they exist? Yeah, do you mean that these carnivorous dinosaurs were on the ark? And of course, or did they even exist? Yeah, that's a good question. And there have been people that said that these fossils were put there by God by for some kind of purpose. I don't know, that the creatures never existed, but God created the earth with those fossils in them. And again, it's just a means of trying to fit the ideas. You know, they told the fossils are millions of years old. They see the Bible doesn't possibly give a chronology of millions of years. So they therefore conclude, well, maybe God created those fossils in the rocks. Very clearly, God created the heavens and the earth in 6 days, 6 earth rotation days. Dinosaurs were land-living, air-breathing animals. What day were they created? Day 6, along with man. Very clearly, we're told that 2 of every kind of land-living, air-breathing animal and bird went onto the ark. How did they get all the animals onto the ark? So something we've got to get rid of is that picture of the ark. Okay, that's more like what the ark looked like. It was 300 cubits long, about 150 meters long, 25 meters wide, 3 stories, 15 meters high. It was a massive, massive floating barge. Water, just the water on the Earth's surface today. Let me get on to dinosaurs though. Most of your dinosaurs were quite small. Some of them were size of a chicken. Your average size dinosaur was about the size of an eland. But even your big, like brachiosaurus, your massive sauropods, like a brachiosaurus, what kind of creatures are dinosaurs? What are they? Mammals? Huh? They are? Reptiles. How were they born? They hatched from eggs. Your biggest dinosaur fossilized eggs are just a bit bigger than a rugby ball. So even something like a Brachiosaurus would have hatched maybe about 1 meter tall. God only needed to bring a young dinosaur onto the ark. Begin to repopulate the earth. There is so much evidence that dinosaurs existed in living memory in the history of mankind. But were they called dinosaurs? No. The word was only well, yeah. And Mokele Mbemba here in Africa, the word was only invented in 1841. The famous British scientist, Sir Richard Owen, he took the Greek words for terrible and lizard, dinosaurus, put them together, skrikakadus in Afrikaans, and that's where dinosaur comes from. So you won't find the word dinosaur before 1841. But do we find depictions or descriptions? Job chapter 40. I do this with kids, 6-year-old, 5-year-old kids in school. I come in, I'm mumbling and reading my Bible, and I say, I need your help, children. Nobody has primed them. And I begin to go through that description in Job chapter 40, where God says to Job, Job, look at this creature, behemoth. I want to remind you about my greatness as a creator. And I go through this description line by line with kids, and the hands start to go up, and they tell me that's a dinosaur that is being described. And of course, the giveaway, it's got a tail like a cedar tree. And then just depictions. Again, kids, normally I ask them, what's that? And this is an 800-year-old temple in Cambodia. And the kids tell me it's a stegosaurus. Yeah? And here's some kind of deer, here's some kind of antelope, and they tell me it's a stegosaurus. We were in, I don't know if I've got, and there's a modern reconstruction of a stegosaurus. Look at the scales on the back there, and evidently there are even some spikes visible on the tail, which the stegosaurus is shown like this as well. In last year, when Renita and I went to the UK, I went and spoke in a few churches in the UK, and we went to Carlisle. It's a beautiful city just south of Scotland. Beautiful cathedral, Carlisle Cathedral. And you go in, and they give you a little one-page tourist information leaflet that shows all the interesting things to see in the cathedral. The most fascinating part of that cathedral is not on the information leaflet. We went to the verger. We said, please, please can we see Bishop Bell's tomb? He was buried in 1496, and he was grumpy. Sometimes they'll just say, no, you can't see it. He was grumpy. He said, yes, I suppose you want to see the dinosaurs. You've got 5 minutes. And right in the middle of the cathedral, under these beautiful stained glass windows, it's covered up in a thick carpet. He's got to roll up the carpet, and it's got these brass engravings around the grave. All of these creatures that are clearly, instantly identifiable. And then there's these creatures. Look here, you can see which way they're facing from the direction of their legs. They've got their necks intertwined, spikes on the tail, something like a Shunnosaurus. I haven't got a modern depiction on this presentation. I've got it elsewhere, of a Shunnosaurus, long legs, long necks, spikes on the tail. Now, whoever did those engravings, that are all creatures that exist today, why would they have done that engraving if it was just some kind of totally mythical creature before dinosaur fossils began to be dug up in the modern era with the beginning of the industrial age and tunnels and canals and everything being dug up? They began to find all of these fossils. It indicates that whoever did those engravings had either had a Shunnosaurus type creature described to them, or they had seen them. What happened to them? They died. Just as the dodo died and the carrier pigeon died and the rhino's in danger of going extinct today, dinosaurs went extinct. Climate change, loss of habitat. Think of some of your, and there was just so much, the flag of Wales. What's depicted on the flag of Wales? We saw it everywhere in Wales. Dragon, yeah? And there is a fossil called Hogwarts dragon, Dracorex, that has been found. It was on National Geographic as well. its depiction, the way they believe it looks just like that dragon on the flag of Wales. This is based on a fossil that's been found in the last few years by Jack Horner, one of the most famous paleontologists, obviously an evolutionist. But so just so much evidence that dinosaurs existed at the same time as men, went extinct, and within the last few hundred years possibly. But think of St. George, the dragon slayer, Beowulf in Northern Europe. What was he famous for? So part of the extinction may have been hunting. Marco Polo described these creatures in his writings on his travels, these creatures that had eyes the size of bread loaves and a mouth so large it could swallow a man at one gulp. Lots and lots of information that dinosaurs existed at the same time as mankind. And lots more information. And the website, our website is full of information like this. Amanda, we'll make yours the last one. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so very, very important question. That it's so clear that God says He will create each according to its kind, and that they would reproduce according to their kinds. So kinds are some kind of definite barrier to reproduction. And let's think of, it may take me a while to bring up the slides that I want, but let's think of the Felidae cat genus, or actually, I think, order of cats. Yeah, the order of the Felidae, we'll call that a kind. You've got lions and tigers and pumas and cheetahs and leopards. Do you know that within that order, every single one of those creatures are able to either hybridize directly, or two different ones that are part of different genera? If they can't hybridize directly, they can both hybridize with a third genera, indicating, but you see them all, they are cats. Cats remain cats, dogs remain dogs, rhinos remain rhinos, but within that, there is, through natural selection, there is this variation, adaptation, tremendous variety possible, but they remain what they are. So kinds is not referring to species. We refer to creatures as species. Modern scientists today still can't come up with exactly what their definition is of a species, because many, it used to be that they can't hybridize. Well, we're finding more and more all of these creatures that are able to hybridize. Tigers with lions, giving us tigons, and ligers, a male lion and a female tiger. All of these different hybridizations showing that they go back to an original created kind. So some of your kinds are probably at the level of genus in our classification system. Some of your kinds may have been at the level of family, some of them even at the level of order. So it's a man-made system, as I say. It's very useful, but it's not absolute. And if hybridization is possible, that would indicate, and it's a very interesting field of study, Barrowman, studying the different kinds and what those are, but you cannot cross between those kinds. So you can't take a dog and a cat and cross-hybridize them, because they are from different created kinds. Within the dinosaur kinds, there were probably between 30 and 50 dinosaur kinds. Again, even modern evolutionists, secular evolutionists like Jack Horner, is saying there's too many dinosaur species out there. I think they've identified about 700 or 800 different dinosaur species. He says they are different, just different, the same creatures being found at different ages. They were at different ages when they were killed and fossilized, found in different parts of the world. They've been given all these different species names, but there's too many species names. He reckons there needs to be about a third less. There should probably be far, far fewer species names. They're just different ages and what have you. Okay, so Bible talks about kinds, not species. Carolus Linnaeus, the guy that developed that classification system, he probably used the word genus as the second level. So you've got species and then genus. Why did he use that? He's a Bible-believing Christian. The Latin word in the Latin Bible for kind is genos. So he probably believed that the created kind was at the level of genus. And that's why he called that second level genus. And some of the kinds are probably at that level, but as I've said, some of the other kinds may have been at a higher level in the classification system. But a very good, important question. Thank you, Amanda. Okay, God bless you. It's been wonderful to be here. And if you're wanting to ask something, come chat to me afterwards or on Thursday night. We're going to have that open time of Q&A as well, and we'd love you to come there as well. But otherwise, come and speak to me after when we're done here. Thank you. Tony, thanks so much for the opportunity to speak to everybody today.